Hey, family, and welcome to Excellence in Everything Live. I am your host, Linnita Hosten. And on EIE, we just talk about all things building confidence, building competence, and developing competitive advantage for tomorrow's workforce. For tomorrow's workforce. And they're embodied in what we call today's teen, today's young adult, rising professional. And so, really passionate about working with that specific group of individuals. And I'm excited about tonight's topic. A hard conversation is anything you have like a challenge in discussing. And there are conversations where your thoughts and feelings and perceptions about something, they're in conflict with someone else for whatever reason that might be. And today we're going to talk about how do you navigate having those conversations which may seemingly be hard? How do you go about doing that softly? So I want to start by asking you this. What is an example of a hard conversation? I want you to write that in the comments. What is an example of a hard conversation? Type that in the comments. And we're going to jump into today's show right after the introduction. You are excellence. Your mind is of excellence. Your visions are of excellence. Your unique superpower is nothing short of excellence. You amplify a voice of excellence. Your contribution to this world will be of excellence. You will achieve your highest goals and desires with excellence. You are capable of excellence. You have an inner power of excellence. You will achieve excellence in everything, every time. So for those of you who I have not yet met, my name is Linnita Hosten, and I coach high school students to devise what I call a PPP, a post-graduation productivity plan that allows them to transition into their dreams careers with ease and make you proud, those of you watching here on the other end. And I just have this crazy vision. I am crazy enough to believe that we could live in a world where everyone is doing what they love. I feel like there's a domino effect to how we would show up at work and in our homes and how that would impact our families. And so that's why I'm passionate about that work, and Excellence in Everything Live is just my way of demonstrating that and displaying some of the skill sets that I have that will be of value to organizations. Speaking of which, I'm really excited to meet the staff tomorrow at NIH. We're going to be talking about, they in for a treat because I'm going for all of their childhood, everything that has happened in their childhood that has made them who they are as they're showing up at work. They don't even know. Oh my gosh. I'm excited about all of the events that I have coming up. But which one I wanted to highlight is the one in December, which is my last engagement of the year, in which we will actually be dissecting this very topic that we're talking about today. How do you have hard conversations softly? I'll be having it with 500 parents in New Brunswick, New Jersey. So tonight you get a treat because you get to sneak peek inside of that training that I get to share with you. And if you're watching today and you're like, man, I would really love to know how we can work together, how I can work with Lanita, this is how you can do so. You can bring me in to speak. You can bring me in to train or teach an organization. I have my own curriculum, so you can inquire about that. We can send you over a menu of services. And then also we can partner to write a curriculum. We write curriculums related to education and career readiness. And so those are the ways that I can serve you. If you're interested in grabbing more information, you can do so at lanitahosten.com/connect. So I'm excited about tonight's topic. Hey guys, hey everybody. If you're watching live, you can go ahead and type that in the chat. If you're watching from somewhere special and I've never yet met you, let me know where you're watching from. Hey there, Coach Vaughn is in the building. Correcting your supervisor. Hey, Asha is in the building. Hi, JP is in the building. Good evening. It's a pleasure. I'm excited. I get excited when you guys show up to participate live. It means the world. I appreciate you spending your time with me. And, I always try my best to keep it brief and keep it good. Hey, C, I hope you are enjoying your vacation. Discussing poor performance. Oh, my goodness. Y'all digging deep now. I asked earlier today, before the introduction, what are some examples of difficult conversations? Discussing poor performance is definitely one. And Asha, you were saying correcting your supervisor. Yes, I have had to do both of these. I've had to let someone go too. So I'm excited about it. Robert's here. He says, I live in Chicago. Shout out to Chi-Town. And Charles Jackson's also here, a really good friend of mine that we met online. Hey, Charles, good to see y'all. I love it. Love it. And JP is watching from Clarksville, Tennessee. It's an amazing feeling for your work to be accessible to those who are across the world. And I'm really grateful for that. Even more grateful that y'all trust me enough to show up. When I think about hard conversations, I think about asking for a raise. I think about correcting your parents about how they might be communicating with you in a way you do not like. I think about how you may have to intervene with someone who's mishandling your child. I think about having a conversation with a parent who believes their child is like an angel and they ain't. Those are like the kind of hard conversation. Or better yet, when I was a coach telling a parent, while you might have paid $600, your child is not equipped to be on my line. Like, I had to have a lot of difficult conversations when I worked in the school. And I feel like, you know, I only got better at having them when I stopped running from having them. And it is one of those things that I feel like definitely a transferable skill that has been able to affect other areas of my life in a great way. But I wanted to talk about some reasons why we run from conflict. Let's just start there. We run from it because we fear that the other person may not receive what we're saying. We feel like, we feel like by us communicating that we may be dismissed or unheard, or maybe the person may deny what we're saying because they're in disagreement. We also fear judgment, maybe of making something that's seemingly small, like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. So I don't want them to think that I'm overthinking or I'm sensitive. We don't want to frame our perspective of self. We don't want that to be misframed. So fear of judgment is another reason why we avoid having these difficult conversations. Sometimes we fear the consequence, the unknown. Like, if I bring this to the table, I mean, is there going to be some backfire? Am I going to be documented? Am I going to be flagged, blackballed, scrutinized, silently like mistreated? And then the other reason why we avoid having these conversations is because we literally just fear the response. We fear what we think the other person may say. We fear like how they may respond to the thing that we're bringing to them. And all of those are very valid reasons to have fear. But I will tell you this. When we avoid difficult conversations, we are literally storing frustration in our bodies. I don't know if you know what it feels like to be weighted down or something to consume you. You start to feel it physically. So it starts off mentally and it becomes draining. Over time, that weight is stored into your body when you're not releasing that. That's why dialogue is so important. God gives us a voice to share and open up those concerns. So, yeah, when we avoid having those conversations, we just store it. We're prolonging unsettling feelings. And I don't know about you, but I got enough weight. I don't need no additional weight, at least not the stuff that I could release by saying. When we avoid difficult conversations, I feel like we're also like, we're drawing compounded assumptions about a person because we already disgruntled, we already upset, we're disappointed. Everything else is like an extra agitation. So they just compound it, like they just keep going, just stacking them up. Like, woo, they just getting real good. And we rob the other person of sharing their perspective or their feelings or their point of view. They just don't even get that. You don't get no say in this conversation. That's exactly what happens when we avoid having conflict. You don't get no say because I already said it, and this is what it is. Sierra said, yes, it is true. Like, yes, fear of the unknown. I don't know about you, but I do not like to be walking on nobody's eggshells. I don't want no eggshells when I'm walking. And so I feel like when we become better at having difficult conversations, we are not only like releasing stress that may be built up, we are giving ourselves chance to live in peace in something that is mentally chaotic. Like, just release that. And we're making room to get more of what we want and need. The only way we get the things that we desire and need is when we advocate for them. I always say this, we don't get what we deserve, we get what we ask for. And sometimes we don't get exactly that, but the communication of the need gives the other person an opportunity to meet us there. Without any communication, we're not even giving the other person a chance to meet our need, whether that be romantically, platonically, in your friendship, at work, in your organization, if you lead people. So there's some value in getting it out. So I wanted to spend some time talking about why I want you to work the muscle to develop the courage to have the hard conversation. And I also wanted to talk about if you have been running from it, I wanted to bring to your light why you may have been running, to give you some, I don't know, to free you up some space to think about how you can stop running. Simon Sinek, he's the author of Great Leaders Eat Last and Start With Why. He said this about having a difficult conversation.
So, for example, after the murder of George Floyd, I was astonished at the number of people in a leadership position, regardless of mid-ranking on up, did nothing.
You mean in the police force or just in
in companies, people who lead teams, that after the murder of George Floyd, they didn't talk to their teams. They just did nothing. And it's not because they're bad people. It's because they didn't have the skills. They didn't know how to have an uncomfortable or difficult conversation. And so they chose nothing, which makes things worse. And this is just a skill we can teach people. And here's how to have a difficult conversation. You bring your team together and say, we need to have an uncomfortable conversation about race and our company. And I'm nervous to have this conversation because I'm afraid that I'm going to bumble something. I'm afraid that I'm going to say something that will trigger somebody. And I'm afraid I'm going to say something, or someone will say something, that may agitate and make this worse. But I think it's more important that we have this conversation than my fear of doing this perfectly. Mm-hmm. And that's how you start a difficult conversation.
Just by saying it. Just say it. I love the transparency and the vulnerability when you are approaching, and we're going to break this down in a second, but when you're approaching something that's really hard, like saying that to break the ice. We are so human. Like, why do we run from being human? I really need to talk to you. This conversation is actually difficult for me, but it's necessary. It needs to be had. And I want us to have the conversation so that we both can have a chance to express how we feel. Like saying that, I mean, it's good for you too. It's the same thing as when you show up for an interview and they say, they start off by, tell us a little bit about who you are and what brings you here. I always tell my students, start by saying, if you're nervous, like I want to start by saying I'm a little nervous, but my nervousness is only because I'm excited and I really want to do well. But to answer your question, like say that so that you can release the feeling. So, I mean, it's nothing wrong with acknowledging your human points. I've read this book and I talk about this book all the time. And this is what inspired me to kind of train families on how to have difficult conversations. This is one of the things that I teach in my curriculum, the Excellence Academy. When I run a cohort of students and their parents, because I learned I can't coach one without the other, we have a session called Having Difficult Conversations. And the intent of that is to teach parents and their teens like the same thing that I'm going to teach you tonight. I'm not going to go into depth, but just a little bit so you can get a taste of it. But I need them to be talking and understanding each person's perspective because they're both valid. Both of their feelings are valid. So getting them to see conflict in a conversational way versus like I'm right and you're wrong kind of way. And I learned this from reading the book. I was inspired by getting better at having difficult conversations by reading a book by Douglas Stone called Difficult Conversations, How to Talk More About Things That Are Hard or something like that. I read that book in 3 days. So good. I highly recommend it. There are very few books that I highly recommend, but that is one. And in the book, Douglas did some research about what are the common barriers in a person's mind when they're having conflict with someone. What are those common barriers that are showing up and impacting the way that they communicate? And he broke them down into 3 conversations. I'm sharing this because I'm not taking credit for what I'm teaching you tonight. I'm sharing with you what I learned from Douglas. And so in his research, he did the study with 2,300 persons. And again, you can look into this. But Douglas says there are 3 conversations that are happening amidst of conflict. And they're happening with 2 people. So that's 6 conversations technically. There's 6 conversations technically. Hey, Legacy. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, JP, land the foundation for both parties. Super good. So let's jump into those 3 conversations I want to touch on, because the goal is brevity and succinctness, because that's what gets y'all back every week. 3 conversations that are happening in the midst of conflict. The first one is what happened. So let's use me and Chelsea. Chelsea in her mind what happened. And then I have in my mind what is happening. And somebody feels like Chelsea may feels like, no, Lanita's wrong. I am right because I should have been. And I feel like, no, I'm right. And Chelsea is wrong. And we each have a perception about like who is to blame. Who's to blame for the issue? Who's to blame for the root cause? But I challenge you to think about when you're approaching a difficult conversation or a hard conversation, if you know a person's already thinking about what's happening, I think it's really easy to just think about how you might have contributed to the conflict. So instead of playing victim, which would be like, I feel like you're wrong because, and you did this to me, reverse engineering it and saying, I showed up in a way, Chelsea, that might have made you feel like completely disarms a person. So instead of coming to the argument, we need to talk because I feel like, Chelsea, you keep eating up all the snacks in the pantry and I'm going grocery shopping more than you. Let's say Chelsea's my roommate. Instead of saying that, I say, Chelsea, I realize that the snacks, we both share the same interest or likeness for snacks. How can we find a way to share, distribute the snacks equally? Because when I come in the cabinet, ain't nothing left in here. So instead of, I guess, putting the blame on Chelsea, giving her an opportunity to express what happened, Chelsea might come back and say, it wasn't even her who ate the snacks. It was her cousin. She had family over this weekend. So not assuming or placing blame, but what happened, giving people a chance to acknowledge or you acknowledging your part that you might have played in the conflict before assuming the victim role. And that's the first conversation, what happened. And I want you to think about when you're approaching conflict, acknowledging like how you might have contributed to the conflict. First, coming to the conversation with that. I know I'm greedy. I know I like to eat a lot. And I like the snacks. So I'm just having a hard time that there are not a lot of snacks left in the pantry at the end of the week. That doesn't blame or point any finger at anybody. That just says how I feel, how I am frustrated, how my own hungriness and hangry self feels showing up at the kitchen. So much easier to work through that softly than I don't see, did you? So easier. So a really good example of how to make something that may be hard soft. Like, how are you contributing to that? How is your emotions or things impacting that? Difficult conversations is nothing but a difference in perspective and opinion. And perspective is just your observation of something. So you have an observation and another person has an observation. Neither one of them are wrong. There is no wrong. Each person's observation is valid. At least that's my take. I want to honor a person's feelings and whatever they might have observed. I can disagree and still validate how they feel. And so that's important. That is so important. So the other conversation, remember I told you there's 6 conversations happening, 3 for each person. The other conversation that's happening is feelings, like how you actually feel. And I don't know if you can relate to this, but when I'm upset about something, it's not easy for me to express how I feel immediately right away. I literally have to be consciously thinking about what led up to make me feel this way. And when I teach on the mind, like the mind it's so intricate. When you are upset, disgruntled, anxious, angry, hangry, sleep deprived, it's really difficult to think consciously. It's hard. You are operating from your subconscious. So those are your feelings, your beliefs, your principles that have been stored in your mind. So when you're in conflict, you're already anxious, upset, disgruntled, angry, disappointed. So whatever you stored in your subconscious about that person, about the instance, about the environment, that's literally what's going to come up unless you are intentional in saying, okay, why do I feel like this? What is the root cause? I don't know about you, but that takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of effort too. But that is what's necessary to make something hard, soft. What is the feeling that you feel and speaking to that? So I would tell Chelsea, I feel like, maybe I'm feeling besides hungry. I'm gonna have to go with another example. Let me go with another example. Oh, this is good. I probably shouldn't be sharing this. All right, so I recently had to have a difficult conversation with my former pastor. I left my former church. I transitioned to a new church home. I had been in my former church for 10 years. It is absolutely home. And I left the proper way. I had a conversation with my leadership. And was it a hard conversation? Some may say, heck yes. How do you tell a person that you love, that you've been with for 10 years plus, very actively engaged, that I'm leaving? It's almost like a divorce, actually. And this is how I knew I have grown in my level of emotional maturity, because I was excited to have the conversation. And I only came to the call and I said, hey, I said, I arranged this call to let you know that Easter Sunday will be my last Sunday here. I just got straight to the point. I didn't have no build up or anything. And the individual asked me, did something happen? Is everything? Absolutely nothing happened, but it's time. The transition is time. And I said how I felt. The next thing was how I felt. I said, I feel like there's a new season. There's something else God has for me. I feel excited. I feel like the place in which the ministry that I've been a part of, in which I've been helping to build, they're good to go. I'm excited about a new chapter. I know that you may be feeling like this is sudden, so speaking to the feeling of the other person, like this is sudden, like this is personal, like this has some type of, it is not any of those things. It's just time. That's literally how, it was a very brief conversation, but some may say like, wow, I just get straight to the point, how I felt, and acknowledging what the conversation that I'm having with you, how that might be making you feel. So the feelings conversation is one too. The best way to diffuse conflict is to validate someone's feelings. And I'm a very empathetic person. So it's not hard for me to almost imagine how you must feel. I recognize that is not common. Like not everyone has that. Everyone may not have that in your genetic makeup. And so you could say, I know this may be a lot. How does it make you feel? Say it. If you're unable to empathize, say it, but acknowledge that their feelings exist. The only way a hard conversation turns soft is if the person feels seen and heard and validated. An easy way to validate someone is allow them to share. Share how you feel. If they need time to cry, give them time to process that. And so the feelings conversation is one we definitely don't want to run from. Definitely don't want to run from. Hey, Walter, good to have you. Thank you for joining us. And Janet says, this is good. And it's real too. Like, I like having these kinds of trainings and conversations when I get a chance to come out and do trainings and coachings with groups. And I want to say this, your agreement or disagreement with someone else, it does not change their truth. So their truth both truths can coexist. We do not have to agree for a truth to exist. So those are the first two conversations. The third conversation is the identity one. Ugh. So both persons show up feeling like, oh, he probably thinks that John probably thinks that I am piss poor. Or he might think that I don't have all my ducks in a row. He might think that I'm incompetent. Oh, as a result of this, he may feel like I'm lazy. Or you may say my spouse, he may feel like I'm being dishonest or I'm not being truthful. So each person is thinking in their head how this conflict is affecting their identity. And I don't know about you, but don't nobody want to be like, no one wants to be seen or perceived any other way than their desired perception. So that is challenged when you enter conflict, no matter what the conflict is. If you feel confident, if you feel very like, almost pompous a little bit, you feel very self-assured. In conflict, immediately that just go out the window. You're thinking like, does this person think that I'm like that challenge thing? You have to check that too. But then the other person is also thinking that. Do they think I'm a mess up? Do they think I'm a screw up? The person who you're bringing the conflict with, do they think I'm unworthy? Do they think I'm untrustworthy? So if you think about the complexities of having a hard conversation, you're not the only one with thoughts running through your mind. So the way that you make something hard soft is acknowledging all these things exist, giving yourself space to be human and the other person space to be human too. Two truths can coexist. Two identities can coexist. Two feelings can coexist. And they matter. You want people to feel like they matter. So those are the three conversations that Douglas Stone highlighted in his book. I highly encourage you to read it. The audiobook version is great too, but I want to say this. When you're talking in absolutes, you immediately negate everything we just talked about. You negate a person's feelings. You negate their identity. An absolute is you always. I never get that. I'm trying to think of another one. It's basically saying like you might have done, you may do it frequently, but always, you always leave the refrigerator open, or do you sometimes, I often see you leave the refrigerator open, but always. So just being cognizant of your language when you're having these kinds of conversations. That's it. I'm a really big stickler for language, because people's feelings and their emotions and its vulnerability can quickly turn. When I say turn, I mean like shut down in these kinds of talks. And I think conflict in any capacity is healthy. I never run from conflict. I'm not saying I'm running towards it, but I'm not running from it. If anything, I'm thinking to myself how I feel, why I feel that way, bringing my own acknowledgments to the table, and making room for the other person to share that as well. The goal is resolve. It's not combat. It is not to win. It's to hear the other person's feelings, frustrations, to hear them out, and for you to express yours and come to a resolve. This ain't the battlefield and we ain't at war. Like, if you can come to the table like that, like, I just want to talk to hear you out, because obviously the page that we're on might be separate. I want to hear where you are. Completely diffuses in the conflict and sets the tone up for a very soft conversation. Conflict is not a bad thing. I cannot say that enough. And if you aren't having any conflict, that's a red flag. It's a red flag of people pleasing. It's a red flag of lack of growth. That means you aren't being challenged. Conflict is okay. It's how you're going about the conflict, expressing it, communicating through it. Yes, it's challenging, but you are robbing yourself of a growth opportunity if when conflict arises, you run. And if you're in a team environment and you are avoidant of conflict, you're teaching your team that how they feel as a result of what's happening does not matter. And you're also teaching them that how you feel does not matter. So after today, I pray that you feel encouraged, at least moved to say something, even if you don't have the words to say. Don't even rehearse. I'm coming to the table because I really want to have this conversation. It's a hard conversation in my eyes, but I value how you feel, and I want to give myself a chance to express myself. So I really want to talk. That doesn't have to be rehearsed. Just say how you feel. Speak to your feelings. Speak to why you may feel like those conversations that we just talked about. Whoo, child, y'all got me sweating over here. um, does this conversation work with family and business, or is there a separate approach? Ooh, that's a good question. So I'm assuming you're talking about the three conversations that we talked about, feelings, identity. Yeah, I don't think so. In my world, oh, okay. I show up the same way in family, business, work, in I am the same person because it's exhausting to change. So the same way I feel like my motto is excellence in everything, you will see that in my friendships, you see that in how I date, you see that in how I'm the same person. When you're not the same person, then that might be a better question. Does it work? So because I show up the same, then yes, it does work because people's feelings matter. How my identity is showing up, that matters. So it works for me. I ain't got time for no mask. I don't want to pretend. This is who you see me show up this is literally who I am. And those of you who know me personally, you will say that. So yes, to me it does. It works. Now, some people feel like, well, I have to have a persona when I'm leading. My question is why? Why does it change? Why do you feel like that might be an identity question? Why do you feel like you have to change? I feel like we can lead. I always say this in my leadership trainings, we can lead from the passenger seat, meaning people centered. And that means the commonality is that we're human. So how we communicate and resolve and talk through, it should be very human and not authoritarian. Listen, I'm going off on a tangent, but I think the approach is the same in my world, in sphere. It's the same. Tell me what you learned. Those of you who are watching, Janice says, yes, I agree. Deaconess Liz Moses says she agrees. What did you learn today? We talked about the three conversations that are happening amidst of conflict. We talked about your role in making a hard conversation soft, diffusing that. What did you learn today? Thank you, Legacy. Legacy said great information. I appreciate that. And thank you for coming by on Tuesdays. And while you all are sharing, I'm see what time. Oh, we're a little bit over time. I'm trying to think of this another time. And oh my goodness, trying to think of another. Oh, this is good. Y'all gonna be in my business. The hardest conversations I've had to have are the ones with my mom because she and I are very close, and we both are very sensitive. And we're both are very headstrong, so we be like, we'd be like bulls. But here's the thing. I know that when I'm communicating with my mom, she has a lens of protection and provision. That's her lens as guidance. She has that lens. Even in my adult form, I don't think that lens of hers will ever change. And I'm coming to her, oh, this is good, because I know teens feel like this too. I'm coming to her like, while I appreciate all of that, my voice matters. How I feel matters, even if it's in disagreement with how you feel. That two can coexist. And we bump heads because if I don't agree necessarily with an approach or an idea, it comes off as if I'm invalidating almost. And I can disagree and still understand. I disagree with that. I don't think the Amish market has the best fried chicken wings. But I recognize that you like them, so let's go there. But they're not the best wings to me. I'm making light of it. But generationally, I think as it's becoming more acceptable for our children to have opinions of their own, and I think that's actually healthy because you want them to have, like, what's the word I'm looking for? You want them to have a level of self-advocacy to draw their own conclusions, to make decisions derived from their own principles, not what people say they should do, right? Because that's people pleasing, that makes them susceptible to peer pressure. You want them to have their own individuality, their communication skills. They only develop that when you give them a voice and allow them to have a difference of opinion. So teaching them how to have a difference of opinion respectfully, I feel like that's a new age way of communication, but I do think it's a healthy thing. If we want our kids to be self-sustaining and self-sufficient, their level of independence doesn't start at 18. It starts with how we're equipping them to think critically. So giving them space to have their own opinion. And you could disagree and say, I don't agree with that, but I could see how you derive that rationale. So my mom and I bump heads because that is not in her generation, that kind of communication is not like it's not like welcomed. That's the word. So I have been helping to retrain her concept of conflict. Like I understand I disagree and that's okay. That doesn't mean that I love you less or respect you less. It just means that I disagree. If we can get to that place, that's a very, very, very healthy place. Okay, I'm catching up, y'all. I'm catching up. I'm catching up. Okay. Conflict is good. Yes, it is. Authenticity and honesty. Yes, they both matter and they're both pivotal in having these kinds of conversations. Walter said he only caught part of the feeling conversation. You gotta go back, Walter. You gotta have to go back and catch the replay. You missed so much. Janny said she learned how to reframe her words without being harsh. Oh my gosh. It's a very skilled form of communication that once you master, you will find that your relationships will improve. People feel safe to be themselves and to express how they feel when they know it will be received in a way that is heard and that the person could communicate to them in a way that's not offensive. No barrier will be up. So that is why when parents say, how did you get my daughter or my son to talk about that? It was literally my listening skills and there was no judgment. That's it. That's all I did. It's really hard to do. It's really hard to do if it's really hard to create that safe space if your verbiage and your language already is invalidating, dismissive. You're creating an unsafe emotional space. So, to reverse engineer that, how do you create a safe emotional space is to validate and hear, even in disagreement. Those things can coexist. So, reframing is good. Yes, Walter, you're going to have to catch the replay. Legacy said, I learned my approach is important when it comes to those hard conversations. Acknowledge my feelings and their feelings. Listen, you're going to be, if you can do that at 20 something, whew, oh my goodness. And imagine, like, sometimes conflict arises because we have the inability to manage our emotions. And a part of the inability to manage your emotions is not being able to identify the feeling, like the root, what's causing me to feel this way before you have an outward reaction. So a lot of the like fighting and those kinds of things, if we can master our emotions, I tell students that all the time, those things wouldn't exist. Andrew said, I don't know how to get my two sons to understand that without him coming across as disrespectful. We can agree to disagree, but I can't hear you if you're screaming. Yes. And you can't hear me if I'm screaming over top of you as a form of self-assertion. Yes, yes, yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. And that just makes no one wants to talk after that. I don't want to talk. You probably don't want to talk. I don't want to talk. So one of the things that I would suggest, Angel, is allowing time to pass. Because sometimes when both persons are at a 10, like, ain't no conscious thinking in that anyway. So let time pass by and then say, hey, can we talk? Can we talk about what happened yesterday? And give them a chance to say yes or no. Because sometimes we have to wait until people are ready to talk. So when you're ready to talk, maybe you can even say that when you're ready to talk, I would really like to talk through yesterday because I want us to get better. When we have conflict, that doesn't mean I don't love you any less. It just means I'm passionate about making sure that you got everything that you need. And I want to make sure you hear me because I love you. I do want to talk through what happened. That's it. Just revisit it when both of you all are back at 0. At 10, I don't know. I can't see the name of the person, but they said that I love the term "in my world." Oh yes, because I'm conscious that a lot of the things that I've been learning, I didn't come out like this. These are learned behaviors for sure. That I'm learning, they're not commonly practiced. It takes a lot of self-restraint actually, and a lot of emotional management to create a safe space for others and to communicate in a way that makes other people feel safe. A lot of restraint. Lot. Yes, words matter, Legacy. And Angel, I'm glad that was helpful. Keep me posted. And don't give up. Don't give up. Difficult conversations only get better when we are practicing having them. And if it doesn't go well the first time, come back and like, okay, let's try again. Try again until you get it right. That's the only way you're going to break through with that person. Remember, you're both human. Both of your opinions are valid. Both of your feelings are valid. And they can coexist. Disagreement does not mean that how you feel don't matter and how I feel doesn't matter. So just remembering that in your own consciousness. So I'm really glad that that was Kurt. Cornelius. Okay, Cornelius, you have to allow Facebook to use your name and face. You have to allow the permission. So there's a little note under when you're live streaming so that I can see your name and acknowledge you live. Thank you, Angel. You're absolutely welcome, Cornelius. And thank you for everybody who attended tonight. I love this stuff. This is the kind of stuff I get the privilege to teach nationwide. I don't take it lightly. And I don't believe in fluff. I don't. I'm coming to give you the real and some practical things and the science. And so that you can practice it and make our families better and our workplaces better. It starts with us. That's all I got. I absolutely love you. There's nothing you can do about it. I'll see you next Tuesday, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. You are excellence. Your mind is of excellence. Your visions are of excellence. Your unique superpower is nothing short of excellence. You amplify a voice of excellence. Your contribution to this world will be of excellence. You will achieve your highest goals and desires with excellence. Excellence in everything, every